posées
as proposed
environnementaux.
by the Brunswick Environmental Network.
My name is Denise Melanson, and I am one of the members of the New Brunswick Environmental Rights Caucus, along with Sam Arnold of the Sustainable Energy Group, Carleton County, Bonnie Hamilton Bogart of Voices for Sustainable Communities and Environments, Marg Milburn, retired public health nurse, Gordon Dalzell of the Citizens Coalition for Clean Air, and Lois Corbett of the Conservation Council of New Brunswick. Je m'appelle Denise Melanson et je suis membre du...
My name is Denise Melanson. I'm a member of the Brunswick Environmental Network Caucus with Sam Arnold.
Comté de Carleton, Bonnie Hamilton de Voices
Bonnie
for
Hamilton Bogart.
Environments, Marg Milburn, infirmière en santé publique retraitée,
Milburn.
Gordon Dalzell de la Coalition des citoyens for Clean Air, et Lois Corbett du Conseil
Corbett from the Conservation Council of Brunswick.
This for us is a very exciting day and a hopeful day for all the dedicated people inside and outside of New Brunswick who have worked tirelessly and with complete determination to produce this important piece of legislation. The Environmental Rights Caucus long ago identified the need for this kind of legislation and has worked hard to arrive at this proposed bill. We hope our politicians will take notice, and we hope that the public will give us their support. The New Brunswick Environmental Bill of Rights restores humans to their place in the environment and, if implemented and acted on, would ensure the ongoing ability of that environment to sustain the health and continuity of the people, all people, of the people and all living things. C'est une journée excitante et pleine d'espoir pour toutes les personnes.
It's an exciting day, full of hope for all people.
À l'intérieur et à l'extérieur.
Within and outside New Brunswick.
Qui ont travaillé sans relâche et avec une détermination totale pour produire cet important texte de loi. Le Caucus des droits environnementaux depuis longtemps.
The Environmental Network Caucus has been working on this for quite a while.
Et a travaillé dur pour aboutir à cette proposition de loi.
And worked hard to ensure this law be.
Que nos politiciens.
So now our politicians.
Le projet de loi sur les droits environnementaux du Nouveau-Brunswick redonne aux humains leur place dans l'environnement.
This will give the human beings their place
et appliquer et assurer la capacité continue de cet environnement à maintenir la santé et la continuité des gens et de tous les êtres vivants.
Maintain the environment for all human beings.
Simultaneous translation is available for today's event. To access it, please click on the interpretation button on the bottom right of your screen and select English if you would like to hear all remarks in English. L'interprétation simultanée est disponible pour l'événement. Pour l'utiliser, veuillez cliquer sur le bouton
click on the interpretation button on the bottom of your screen.
Sélectionnez French.
And select French or English if you want to hear everything in that particular language.
We will be recording this event. Nous enregistrerons cet événement. Alors, rapidement,
so quickly, this is the agenda for the day.
Monsieur Kenneth Francis, l'aîné très respecté de la Première Nation et le Sivoktuk, a gracieusement accepté d'ouvrir ce lancement. Ensuite, Madame Bogart, Madame Bonnie Bogart,
Mrs. Bonnie Bogart Hamilton,
Madame Marg Milburn, présenteront
Marg Milburn will be
de loi sur les droits environnementaux.
Making an introduction of proposed Brunswick Environmental Bill of Rights.
Bonnie et Marg ont consacré des années de leur vie.
Bonnie and Marg has devoted many years.
Soit promulgué.
You know.
Cette présentation sera de la présentation de notre extraordinaire conférencier principal, le Dr. David R. Boyd.
David R. Boyd will be our keynote speaker.
nous enchaînerons avec quelques brèves vidéos de partisans de projet de loi, puis un poème interprété par Quinn McCaskill, une jeune élève
Quinn McCaskill will be
passionnée
making a
par la
presentation
et la justice climatique.
on a spoken word performance.
Ensuite, Gordon Dalzell, ancien travailleur social et protecteur de longue date, expliquera comment soutenir ce projet de loi sur les droits de l'enfant.
Explain how this environmental bill of rights
à faire en sorte qu'il soit présenté à l'Assemblée législative.
And it's going to present it to the Legislative Assembly so it can eventually come along in Brunswick.
This event is being held on the unceded traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoq, and Passamaquoddy peoples. And now I would like to ask Kenneth to share his words of wisdom with us and bless this venture, all the while hoping that we actually manage to get him on the call. And in hope, Annika, is he on? Yes, okay. Kenneth, we're offering you this tobacco for accepting to share your wisdom with us. We also need to acknowledge your grief and that of all Indigenous peoples in Canada for the trauma of the residential school system. The discovery of a mass grave of children at a school in British Columbia is further proof of an utterly inhumane and deliberate policy of erasure and dispossession. So we want you to know that we're thinking of you in that way. So would you please just, Kenneth, share with us all the wonderful things you have to say.
Oh, you have to unmute yourself.
Yep, I will.
There you go. Am I good? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very honored to be asked to do this. I'm taken aback sometimes when I need to think about all the stuff that is happening in this world today. And the 215 children that were found is beyond anything that I can put into words. It's just stunning. And I'm just going to ask a couple seconds of silence in their honor. Thank you so much. I'm just going to do a small smudge for myself. I wish I could share that. it's really uplifting. It's really uplifting. So anyway, before I get into anything at all, I just want to say an opening prayer. It's what they call it, an Indian prayer, but I'm going to say it in Mi'kmaq in honor of my ancestors. Akchi amando, aksidun geganos tauto nikto, tanyu gamalamin, nodui, telari gagni napte di menane. Nodai of Mulgi Ganodium, Achnid and Darcy Kelly. You're gonna wait me and Tan we was the Negon, Pigigo, Nimi and Meguel, must couldn't make period, Kalpas here now. You're gonna wait bidden, make it element, then there's a coigisi doing, and see the one giscat or not only in Daniel Yellowsy. You're gonna wait neither dancing, Kulaman getting sheet. Dan dia sekolah kita nama ada ni kema. Jika namu eksi don dan dia nama sudi keci minggu dan dia signibi dan dia sepundo. Kuilam lagi kena udi. Muaji kena aftin si kena mana pas bisi kena dosi ni nanya kena si. Jika namu ni ragis kajain kalian dan namolin. Kulawan ni majuan gasi astige. Nago sa telka pasiyas na kisitas daneman maagsidong taon. Wala rin. Thank you, Creator, for me being able to say that in my Mi'kmaq language. But still, we have gone through a lot, and I do owe a lot of that to my parents. During the time of the scooping, when Indian agents and RCMPs were trying to fill up the residential schools, they came to my house right after school was over. The very next day, my dad took us in a boat and we went out to the beach and we stayed there all summer until school began. And we did that every summer after that. So from that, I've learned a lot of real valuable lessons. I didn't even know my dad was doing that. I thought we were just having fun in the sun in the summertime. But we lived off the land and it was fun. It was really fun. So my language, I kept my language. And again, I remember growing up with a bunch of kids that we used to play in the woods all the time. And like we would talk Mi'kmaq all day long, nobody's business. And so when school started, there was a code amongst us, amongst all the children from Mozibuktu, some kind of code that said, you're not supposed to be speaking English. So when the schoolmaster, the teacher, asked us questions, we used to have to answer in the shortest possible way you could come up with. You had to be a genius, because if you didn't, if you spoke more English words than was necessary, the kids outside during the playground would make fun of you and the noise that you made. He used to call it noise. But anyways, I remember that really well. Like I tried to be smart aleck one time and answered the question as long as I could. And boys, did I ever get a teasing when I got outside. Anyway, I wanted to say that because our language, has been strong, and I'm very proud that I still have that. And as I go through my introductions, I think you'll understand why. Anyway, I was born here in Elsibuktu, and I used to go out in the woods all the time and spend my time there. Like I wasn't really talking to birds and animals, but I felt very comfortable in the woods. I was really, really comfortable in the woods. I don't ever remember being scared of getting lost, nor did all the other children. We would just go in the woods and we knew exactly where we were all the time. There was no idea, there was no concept of being lost in the woods because you were right in your element. So, and when I went to high school, and I'm going to tell this little story. The first couple of months in high school at St. Joseph's in Memramcook, I was devastated with loneliness. Like if I didn't know any better, I would have said I was crying all the time, but there were no tears in my eyes. One afternoon, I was sitting alone all by myself, just beside the string of trees, and I was contemplating on going home. And I just made up my mind, and I was going home. I was just too lonesome. I just couldn't take it anymore. I wasn't worried about what my parents would say because I knew I just have to go home. And just when I started to get up, there was a bird flying at about eye level to my height and sitting down. And it was flying like right across my path, about 50, 60 feet away. And all of a sudden, just when I wanted to stand up, it made a 90-degree turn and started flying towards me. And sure enough, I said to myself, he's coming, he's going to sit on my shoulder. And sure enough, he came and he sat on my shoulder. I didn't move much. And he started tweeting away and making all these really beautiful noises. And my loneliness left. He flew away with my loneliness. And I was able to stay there the next 4 years. I'd come home and spend the weekend out in the woods. But the connection that we have to the forest and to the animals and the plants, I will try to explain it to you in this way because other people have seen it, and like other people that are not indigenous have seen it and they described it in books that I've come across, and I just want to read passages from there. And one of them, the first one is How to Build a Birch Bark Canoe. It's David Gidmar. And to be able to learn how to build a canoe, he was required to stay with the native people for an X number of years before they would teach him the art of making a canoe. And so one of the things that he says here, I'm going to read it. In years past, there were many white men in the woods, and they lived much as the Indians did. Many were from Europe. The woods held a strange fascination for the Indians, perhaps more than it did for the whites in the region. Most of them acquired a very good knowledge of the woods, necessarily, or they would not have survived. Hans, a Dane, seemed to have as much woods ability as anyone. So I posed him this question: were white trappers as good in the woods as Indians? Hans had a skeptical side to him, and I didn't know which side he was going to answer with. So quotation marks, as far as canoeing and portaging went, he said, the white trappers were often as good and sometimes even better than the Indians. Then he said with a certain amount of incredulity and amazement, but damn, it seemed like the Indians could almost talk to the animals. It was as if they knew what the animals were thinking. And he thought about that for a moment, still impressed, even after decades of living with them. So that's the very concept that that I was trying to convey. And so here's another passage from Anne Prulot. The book is titled Bark Skins, and it's about the devastation that is happening to our forest. It's almost like an invasion. It's almost like a war on our trees and our forests. The way she describes it, it's unbelievable. But she says, this is a passage from the book. He sat there for an hour on a knotty and punishing pine bench before the governor's secretary beckoned him in. As a young missionary, Louis Joseph Crème had first served in New France. Later, he had been sent to Port Royal in Acadie, a true wilderness, and among them, the Mi'kmaq, he began to keep a notebook of their rich vocabularies of geological structures, weather conditions and seasons, plants, animals, mythological creatures, rivers, and tides. He saw they were so tightly knitted into the natural world that their language could only reflect the union, and that neither could be separated from the other. They seemed to believe they had grown from this place. As the trees grow from the soil, as the new stones emerged above ground in spring, he thought the central theme for this tenet, Wajis Aliadim, deserved an entire dictionary unto itself. Which is alien means like the sprouting, you sprout right from the ground. So that's how we envision ourselves. our Mi'kmaq word for birth, being born is usit amuye. Usit amuye. That means I become of earth. So when you're born, you become of earth, not a part of it, not somewhere else, not a one that's dominant, not one that's below, but part of it, the part of the whole earth. That's what you become when you're born. So you see, that is very, very central to anything that we do at Go Big Lodge, or when I was invited to do this, I really wanted to do this introduction to our indigenous concept of the world, because I felt that it would be contributing to the wholeness of what you guys are trying to do. So with that, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to do so.
Thank you so much, Kenneth, for those wonderful remarks and for centering us for this event. It was always inspirational. Thank you again. I will now invite Marg and Bonnie to take the floor and present the proposed New Brunswick Environmental Bill of Rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Today is Clean Air Day and Environment Week, so it's extremely appropriate that we're speaking with you today. The proposed Environmental Bill of Rights, an act to protect children, all New Brunswickers, and nature, a catalyst for sustainability. Ella Kissy-Deborah is the first person in the world to have air pollution listed as a cause of death on her death certificate. She was 9 years old when she died in London, UK in February 2013. Her death was due to asthma contributed to by exposure to excessive air pollution, stated the coroner in a landmark ruling announced on December 16, 2020. According to the World Health Organization, air pollution kills an estimated 7 million people worldwide every year. These deaths are tragic because they are preventable and can be avoided through healthier environments. They never should have happened. Our Environmental Rights Caucus dedicates this presentation to Ella Kissy-Deborah's memory. Bonnie.
Yes, the issue, broadly speaking, today is that we're looking at connections between environment, health, and sustainability. But as Kenneth was saying, we are all of Earth. So those connections are all there, and all we have to do is think of our origins, and we'll have the issue pretty well in front of us. The more specific issue is we're talking about children today and the world's populations and how they are suffering and dying from the effects of global environmental disruption, pollution, and climate change. And these WHO and UNICEF and Lancet Commission folks then went on to say the ecological damage unleashed today endangers the future of children's lives on our planet, their only home. So we need to think of our Mother Earth as our only home today. As a province, we must act now if we're to protect ecosystems, lives, and future generations. This is a huge global issue, so what action can New Brunswick take that would make the biggest impact? Today, we are offering this solution. The proposed New Brunswick Environmental Bill of Rights, an act to protect children, all New Brunswickers, and nature. This will set us on a path to a greener, more sustainable province. At the same time, it will protect the health and well-being of our children for the benefit of future generations of strong, healthy, resilient citizens. And we're looking at why children and why not everyone should be included in this bill. Well, the main point is that when we protect children from environmental harm, we are protecting everyone. And that would include all our relations in the forests and in the sea. The preamble of our draft bill says scientific research demonstrates that children from birth to 6 and the unborn child are much more vulnerable than adults to environmental harm. Our response to that is that we need to reduce children's exposure to environmental harm. That's the goal. All of us around the world face the same environmental harms: air pollution, water pollution, climate change, chemicals, toxic substances and waste, and the loss of biodiversity and access to nature. That is from the UNICEF website. There is a general consensus in the research that the health of children and their future is intimately linked to the health of the planet. And in February of 2020, the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and Lancet Commission presented their case for placing children at the heart of sustainability. And that is what we would like to do in New Brunswick. New Brunswick has obligations under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which recognizes that children have rights and freedoms that need to be protected, including Article 24, the right to the highest attainable standard of health. So we're focusing on children for many reasons. They will inherit the earth. They will be the ones restoring and repairing the earth's degraded environments. And within our proposed bill, we have the principle of intergenerational equity, meaning that current generations of New Brunswickers are obligated to leave the environment in the same or better condition as what they found it in. Another reason is that children are now today being born already polluted with chemicals. Studies have found over 200 industrial chemicals in infant cord blood, many of which injure their developing brains, as well as their nervous systems, lungs, immune systems, and reproductive organs. It only takes a very small dose at a very specific point in the child's development to cause lifelong injury to children. The nature of children is that their exposures are proportionally far greater than adults. They have the additional exposure pathways of the placenta and breast milk. And proportionally by body weight, they basically eat more, drink more water, eat more food, breathe more air compared to adults, which means taking in more contaminants. Children's physiology is less developed to metabolize and excrete these contaminants. And the last little point on children's nature is that they tend to be more active, explore their environment orally, and play lower to the ground where the contaminants settle. In New Brunswick, we have some industrialized areas with air pollution levels that exceed allowable levels, resulting in toxic effects that harm children disproportionately. Effects such as stunted brain development and reduced lung function and the onset of asthma. And when we have children having all these exposures, it can also set the stage for problems later in life, such as cancer, chronic respiratory illnesses, cardiovascular diseases, and stroke. Mark?
The definition of biodiversity: the variety of life, the number and complexity of species, either within an ecosystem or on larger spatial scales. It is a complex concept, including functional, genetic, and other dimensions of diversity. Biodiversity is essential for robust ecosystem function, and when biodiversity declines, ecosystems degrade. The biodiversity crisis plays an important part in climate change. Protection and restoration of biodiversity would not only save nature for future generations, but also help to tackle climate change and avoid negative consequences on our food, health, and economy. Children benefit when we protect biodiverse natural systems. Let's imagine a world where children have the right to special protection from environmental harm and the right to live and grow in healthy, biodiverse environments. We can make it happen if we start now. Bonnie.
Yes, our proposed act, the development of this act is a little bit, has some interest to it because it's been going on for the past 10 years in many iterations and many presentations made to successive governments. And we have continued our work and want to have it tabled in the legislature in 2021. The latest effort began in June of 2019 when our Environmental Rights Caucus brought together 10 environmental and child youth-focused groups to work towards the establishment of a child-focused New Brunswick Environmental Bill of Rights that would ensure that all New Brunswickers and future generations would have the right to a healthy environment. If enacted, the bill will do the following: ensure that children, and therefore all New Brunswickers and future generations, have the right to a healthy environment. We stress that when children are protected, we are all protected from environmental harm. The bill would spell out government's duties to protect New Brunswickers' environmental rights and therefore protect us all from environmental harm. It would ensure that all New Brunswickers have access to the necessary environmental information and be able to participate meaningfully in environmental decision-making. And it would provide ways for New Brunswickers to obtain legal remedies to prevent or redress harm, environmental harm. Mark?
Still you.
Oh. Our guiding principle is the primacy of the child, placing children at the heart of sustainability in our province. The principles articulated in the draft bill, you're probably familiar with most of them. Sustainable development, preserving biodiversity, polluter pays, the precautionary principle, environmental justice, public trust, and intergenerational equity is the one that I wanted to be sure to reach you with. Meaning that what we said before, the principle that current generations hold in trust the environment for future generations and have an obligation to use its resources in a way that leaves the environment in the same or better condition. The public trust is the last principle, which refers to the government's responsibility to preserve and protect the collective interest of the people in the quality of our environment for present and future generations. Okay, Marg.
Why act now? As Greta says, our house is on fire. We have to act now. Greta puts us all to shame. We have stolen her future and all the children's futures if we don't act now. We are running out of time. Our province is in a good position to act now. Number one, New Brunswickers are ready to take a stand for the environment. We come in all shapes and sizes from ages 9 months to 90 years. We have staged demonstrations on the grounds of the legislature on a host of environmental issues. And to battle the COVID-19 virus, we stepped up to say we were all in this together. We want and need to make our world a better place for our children and future generations. Secondly, now is the time to reimagine our province's future and to create a better than normal recovery plan that makes New Brunswick safer, healthier, and more resilient to future pandemics. The pandemic has highlighted our need to be able to grow more of our own food. We need to be independent in our own food security, and we need to do it sustainably and with environmental protection. And thirdly, our government has been recently using a collaborative all-party approach to problem solving. The all-party committee on COVID-19 has been very successful, and the all-party standing committee on climate change and environmental stewardship was the first of its kind in Canada. Bonnie.
Okay, we have the cover of one of David's books there on the left, Right to a Healthy Environment. Thank you so much to David for his prolific work on this topic. We now know that governments of at least 156 of the 193 nations of the UN have recognized the right to a healthy environment in legally binding instruments. This list does not yet include Canada, but there is hope. On April 13th, 2021, the federal government introduced Bill C-28, Strengthening Environmental Protection for a Healthier Canada Act. If this bill becomes law, right to a healthy environment. There is support for this idea. Across Canada, there are 174 municipal declarations where they have indicated their support for the right to a healthy environment for all Canadians, including 5 from New Brunswick: Sackville, Bertrand, Beresford, Gagetown, and Tracadie. And in terms of David Boyd's research, he has found that some of the benefits of the recognition of the right to a healthy environment include stronger environmental performance. For example, we'll have cleaner air, safer drinking water, and smaller ecological footprints. Stronger environmental laws and policies, improved implementation and enforcement, greater citizen participation in environmental decision-making, increased accountability. I assume that is of government, corporations, and polluters in general. Reduction in environmental injustice, such as environmental racism. Next.
Remember Ella from our first slide? She was one of the casualties of society's inadequate regulations around air pollution. We don't doubt that we've experienced similar tragedies in New Brunswick. Researchers from Harvard, in collaboration with researchers from 3 British universities, studied global mortality caused by pollution from fossil fuels. Their findings were published in February 2021. They found deaths from fossil fuel air emissions are higher than previously thought. A total of 8 million people worldwide died in 2018 from fossil fuel related air pollution. Fossil fuel emissions accounted for 18% of total global deaths in 2018, which was almost 1 in 5 deaths. And regions with the highest concentration of fossil fuel related air pollution, including Eastern North America, have the highest rates of mortality. Dr. Frederica Pereira, a professor at Columbia University's Mailman School of Public Health and the director of the Columbia Center for Children's Environmental Health, states, "There's no question that reducing our dependence on fossil fuels would achieve highly significant health and economic benefits for children worldwide, both immediately and well into the future, vastly improving the health and well-being of generations to come. Knowing this, we have a moral imperative to enact child-centered energy and climate policies that address the full array of physical and psychosocial stressors to which children are subjected due to fossil fuel combustion." Perfect. Support. Currently, we have 20 organizations across New Brunswick supporting our proposed Bill of Rights. We aim to gain more support from New Brunswick and from Canadian and international groups, corporations, professional associations, and individuals. We have support from some Canadian associations, such as the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, the Canadian Association of Nurses for the Environment, Climate Reality Canada, and we have international support from the Children Environmental Rights Initiative. We strongly encourage all of you to support us in this endeavor. Please share our proposed bill widely. And near the end of the launch today, Gordon will give you some instructions on how you can support our proposed Bill of Rights. Call to action. As New Brunswickers, we must ask ourselves, what legacy are we going to be leaving our children? Number 1, we must support the health of New Brunswick's ecosystems by addressing environmental health challenges, mitigating the climate crisis, and tackling the driving forces of environmental change, all of which enhance the integrity of the natural systems on which our population and all humanity ultimately depends. Number one, these are our wants. We want to create an all-party committee to work on this proposed bill and include representative community stakeholders, children and youth, environmental non-government organizations, and Indigenous communities. Secondly, we want to add representatives of the Department of Health, including Public Health, and the Office of the Child and Youth Advocate to the Standing Committee on Climate Change and Environmental Stewardship. Thirdly, we want to ask the Standing Committee on Climate Change and Environmental Stewardship to develop an analysis of the impacts of such a proposed bill on the work of government and make appropriate recommendations. This would include asking all relevant departments what difference such a bill would make to their achievements of their mandate. And finally, and ultimately, we want to enact this proposed bill as soon as possible because we know it is the correct, moral, and ethical thing to do.
Thank you, Mark and Bonnie, for that wonderful presentation. Lois, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I think I've unmuted myself successfully, Anika.
Yes, you have.
I get to do an awful lot of fun things, at my work at the Conservation Council of New Brunswick. But today seems to be especially fun because I get to introduce one of my heroes, a peer of mine in the environmental movement, and someone who I have admired for most of my adult working life. Dr. Boyd is the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Environment, appointed in 2018, and he'll serve us and the rest of the world till 2020. He's an associate professor of law, policy, and sustainability at the University of British Columbia at 2 schools. So at UBC, he shares his knowledge and his great teaching skills with 2 sets of students, those at the university's Institute for Resources, Environment, and Sustainability, and those at the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs. David writes a lot, and it's really great reading. He's written over 10 books and hundreds of reports and articles on environmental law and policy, human rights, and constitutional law. Books of note that I have right here in the corner of my desk are Thirst for Justice, most recently published, The Rights of Nature, The Optimistic Environmentalist, and The Environmental Rights Revolution. One of my go-to papers out of those hundreds that David has written over his great career was, it's an oldie but a good one, David. Wild by Law, a report on the laws governing Canada's parked and protected areas, where he was presumptuous enough to give a grade to all of the provinces. And I'll leave it to the people on the call to guess what grade New Brunswick got, from an F to an A. In The Rights of Nature, David says that there are moments in life, rare and fleeting in my case, that's David saying that, not me, when you get a flash of insight. And one of his was, would it help if the Garry Oak ecosystem had legal rights? David's so-called rare insights have taken world leaders, grassroots activists, and mere lowly drafters of law and policy on an incredible journey over his career. For me, that's been watching the path unfold from his early work at the Sierra Legal Defense Fund. You on the call would know it better, likely as Eco Justice Canada. And to just a few weeks ago, when, shall we say, in capital letters, David was very, very helpful in making certain that the new and improved Canadian Environmental Protection Act will include the recognition that every individual in this country has the right to a healthy environment. David lives on Pender Island in British Columbia, right between Vancouver Island and the mainland, where he's working to protect the Garry Oak ecosystem and the oceans and the creatures in the oceans that surround it, and where he has every day an occasional flash of insight. Over to you, David.
Lois, thank you very much for that perhaps exceedingly generous introduction, but I really am delighted to join you here today for the launch of this incredibly vital and timely initiative. It was great to hear Kenneth's opening remarks and that terrific presentation by Bonnie and Marg. And I want to share with you the story of what I believe to be one of the most critical human rights of the 21st century, the right to a healthy environment. As Kenneth indicated, you know, scientists estimate that there are about 100 billion planets in the Milky Way galaxy and more beyond that in the universe. But there is only one planet that is known to support life, and that is the Earth, this precious blue-green home that is such a miraculous place, filled with natural wonders. And yet, as human beings, we have taken this planet for granted. And I don't want to get into the details because I know you're all familiar with them. But I think at the outset, it is critical just to acknowledge that we are in the midst of a global environmental crisis. We have the climate emergency, the collapse of biodiversity, pervasive pollution of air, water, and soil that's killing millions of people every year, as well as this new threat, the surge in emerging zoonotic diseases, exemplified by the terrible COVID-19 pandemic that has blighted our lives for the last 16 months. And yet we have to recognize this, my friends, that all human rights depend on healthy ecosystems and biodiversity. Whether you talk about the right to life, the right to health, the right to food, to water, to culture, to a healthy environment, everything depends on functioning, healthy ecosystems, without which there would be no clean air to breathe, no safe water to drink, and no healthy, nutritious food to eat. So I'm going to talk about the global picture because Bonnie and Marg did such a good job of talking about Canada and New Brunswick. You know, globally, for decades, governments have signed treaties and made pledges to address issues like climate change and biodiversity. 1992 was the big year when we had the Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And if you look back over the past almost 30 years, it's an embarrassing litany of broken promises and empty rhetoric. Since 1992, natural gas use is up over 80%. Oil use is up over 30%. Coal use is up over 60%. And overall, greenhouse gas emissions have risen by more than 60%. In 2015, nations pledged to hold the increase in global average temperatures to 2 degrees, or ideally to 1.5 degrees. Yet we're already at 1.2 degrees of warming, and we're clearly not on track to meet the Paris targets. Similarly, none of the nature-saving targets agreed upon by parties to the Biodiversity Convention in 2000 were met by 2010. None of the Aichi biodiversity targets were met by 2020. And so here we are. Scientists' warnings have never been more dire or more clear. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, young people, Indigenous people are all telling us the same thing, that we need to make rapid, systemic, and transformative changes in all aspects of society to address this global ecological crisis. And that's where there's such a promising role for human rights. If we look back over past centuries, we see that rights have played a role as catalysts for societal transformations. Think about the abolition of slavery, the women's rights movements, the end of apartheid. Think of the way that rights are being strategically used by Indigenous peoples, by LGBTQ plus persons, by persons with disabilities. Now, I'm not saying it's simple or easy or quick, but there can be no doubt that human rights have sparked transformative changes. And in the environmental context, human rights can overcome the Achilles heel of international environmental law, which is the absence of effective enforcement mechanisms and the resulting lack of accountability. In 2019, the Supreme Court of the Netherlands, in the Urgenda case, ruled that the Dutch government was violating the rights of its citizens under the European Convention on Human Rights by failing to take sufficient action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The court acknowledged the severity of the climate crisis and ordered the government to make faster, deeper cuts. And how has the government responded? By closing a coal-fired power plant that was built just a few years ago, by spending billions of euros on renewable energy, by lowering speed limits, by putting solar panels on the roof of every school in the Netherlands, and more. Just a few weeks ago, Germany's constitutional court ruled that the German government was violating the rights of children and youth and ordered the German government to take bolder climate action. The German government has already responded by strengthening both short and long-term targets. Just last week, another Dutch court, ruled that Royal Dutch Shell was violating the human rights of Dutch citizens and ordered Shell to reduce emissions 45% by 2030. And again, last week, an Australian court ruled that the government must consider children's rights before approving the expansion of a coal mine. And if they consider children's rights, they cannot expand that coal mine. So you see, environmental law plus human rights equals accountability. So it's really exciting in the context of this global environmental emergency to see the emergence and evolution of this new human right, the right to live in a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Of course, I should say that environmental responsibilities and environmental rights have been part of customary Indigenous law for millennia in Canada and around the world. But we're a bit slow in the Western society, and it wasn't until Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, in 1962, that this idea was first written down. And then in 1972, at the first Global Environmental Summit, the nations of the world created the Stockholm Declaration and said that people have the right to a healthy environment. Now, that was just a political declaration, but it has inspired change ever since. In 1976, Portugal was the first country to put the right to a healthy environment into its constitution. In 1978, Spain followed suit. Then it was put in the African Charter for Human and People's Rights in 1981, the San Salvador Protocol, which is part of the American Convention on Human Rights, in 1988, and on and on. And as Bonnie mentioned, the right to a healthy environment is now recognized either in constitutions or legislation or regional human rights treaties or court decisions by over 80% of the UN's member states, 156 out of 193 countries. And as Bonnie stated, Canada is not yet among that 156, but it's really exciting to know that there is a bill before Parliament that will bring us onto the right side of history. And I'm happy to talk more about that later on. But people always ask me, what does it mean to have a right to a healthy environment? In fact, Jonathan Wilkinson, Canada's Environment Minister, asked me that last year. What does it actually mean? And the right to a healthy environment has two components. It has a substantive component and a procedural component. The substantive component is just clear, basic common sense. Clean air, clean water, healthy and sustainably produced food, a stable climate, healthy ecosystems and biodiversity, and non-toxic environments where we can live, work, study, and play. That's the heart of it. And then the procedural aspects of the right to a healthy environment, think of that as like the toolbox that enables us to achieve the substantive elements. And those tools are things like access to environmental information, public participation in environmental decision-making, and access to justice when our right to a healthy environment is being threatened or violated. And so that's the heart of it. And the next question is, does it really make a difference? And Bonnie mentioned this, that the answer is unequivocally yes. In countries where the rule of law is strong, where they have functioning institutions and low levels of corruption, the right to a healthy environment is a catalyst for stronger environmental laws, improved implementation and enforcement of those laws, higher levels of public participation, increased accountability, and most importantly, better environmental performance, lower levels of air pollution, faster reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, smaller ecological footprints, and improved performance on a whole variety of environmental metrics. I did a bunch of research on this and published a book called The Environmental Rights Revolution in 2012. But since then, economists with far greater statistical skills than I have published peer-reviewed articles proving that there's a causal link between recognition of the right to a healthy environment and improved environmental performance. So let's just go on a quick world tour here and let me share some stories from countries around the world of how the right to a healthy environment makes a difference. And I'll start with really my favorite, which is Costa Rica. Costa Rica recognized the right to a healthy environment in the early 1990s. And at that time, Costa Rica had undergone decades of devastating deforestation, and forests were down to less than 25% of the total land area of Costa Rica. Over the last 30 years, they have aggressively reforested that country, and they are now above 50% in terms of forest cover. They have created an amazing system of protected areas that now covers close to 30% of their country. They have a carbon tax, and they use the revenues from that carbon tax to support indigenous peoples, campesinos, and farmers to protect ecosystems on their land. Costa Rica gets over 99% of its electricity from renewable sources, from wind, from solar, from hydro, from geothermal. And Costa Rica has passed laws prohibiting offshore oil and gas development, prohibiting open pit mining. And the thing I really love about Costa Rica is that whenever scientists study the happiest countries in the world, Costa Rica is right there at the very top of the charts. Costa Rica also is one of the first countries to have a long-term plan for total decarbonization. France is another country that has had great success with the right to a healthy environment. They added it to their constitution relatively recently in 2004, and then they became the first country in the world to ban fracking, the first country in the world to ban all uses of the bee-killing neonicotinoid pesticides. And most recently, France became the first wealthy country to ban the export of pesticides from France that are not permitted to be used in France. France is also one of the first countries to explicitly recognize in law people's right to breathe clean air. So it's no coincidence then that in light of their leadership on the right to a healthy environment, Costa Rica and France are co-chairs of the inspiring High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, which is calling for the incorporation of the target of protecting 30% of all of Earth's land and waters by 2030, calling for that to be at the heart of the new post-2020 global biodiversity framework. There are many other countries I could talk about. In Slovenia, recognition of the right to a healthy environment sparked an initiative to really get serious about recycling and composting. And in the space of a decade, they went from putting 76% of their waste into landfills to less than 7%. Slovenia also has increased the amount of protected areas in that country to over 40%. In Argentina, thanks to the right to a healthy environment, billions of dollars have been invested in cleaning up and restoring the Riachuelo River watershed, which has addressed a terrible and longstanding environmental injustice and finally recognized the rights of people living in the poorest communities in Buenos Aires. In Kenya, the right to a healthy environment was recently used to block a proposed coal-fired power plant, which would have been the first coal-fired power plant in East Africa. In Mexico, the right to a healthy environment was recently used to block an ill-considered tourism development that would have destroyed a healthy mangrove ecosystem. In the Philippines, the right to a healthy environment was used to stop logging of old-growth forests and to require the cleanup of Manila Bay. One of my favorite stories comes from Colombia, where a group of 25 children and youth, who I actually met a couple of years ago in Bogota, they filed a lawsuit against the government, arguing that the deforestation in the Colombian portion of the Amazon was a violation of their constitutional right to a healthy environment. The Supreme Court of Colombia agreed with them and ordered the government to sit down with the country's leading scientists and those young people to come up with a plan to end deforestation over a short timeline. There are so many examples I could share with you. Last year, I actually presented a report to the United Nations Human Rights Council that included over 500 good practices in the implementation of the right to a healthy environment, drawn from more than 150 countries. One of my favorites, which people in Canada have rarely heard about, is something called the Great Green Wall, which is a wildly ambitious project being undertaken by 21 African nations in the Sahel region, just south of the Sahara Desert. And this is about planting billions of trees, restoring millions of hectares of land to grow food, about providing solar electricity for people across this vast region who have never had access to electricity, about building water capture and storage systems so that they can irrigate farmland. And it's just an amazing project which will protect the human rights and improve the living conditions of tens of millions of peoples while restoring ecological health. Now, I have to say the right to a healthy environment is not a magic wand. It doesn't completely change everything immediately. Last year, it did not prevent the Supreme Court of Norway from upholding the government's terrible decision to open up new areas of the Arctic Ocean for oil and gas exploration. But given all of the evidence that I've put before you today, the right to a healthy environment is clearly a catalyst for positive changes. Unfortunately, it is not yet recognized for billions of people. 37 countries, including the United States, China, Canada, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, do not yet recognize it. Although, as has been discussed, there's a bill before Parliament in Canada, and there's also a law in Congress in the United States called the Environmental Justice for All Act, which is championed by Vice President Harris and would include for the first time recognition of the right to a healthy environment in the United States. In my role at the UN, I am championing UN resolutions to recognize the right to a healthy environment, something that people have been working on since the early 1990s. And the good news is there is unprecedented momentum towards United Nations recognition of the right to a healthy environment. I'm working with a group of states led by Costa Rica, Fiji, the Maldives, Morocco, Slovenia, and Switzerland. And those states are committed to introducing a resolution. It may happen as early as the September session of the Human Rights Council, but it will happen next year at the latest. Last year, over 1,000 civil society organizations from around the world called on the UN to pass this resolution. 15 United Nations agencies, from the Secretary General to the UN Environment Program and UNICEF, have all gotten together and unanimously supported recognition of this right. And it has never been needed so badly. In the short term, the goal is universal recognition of the right to a healthy environment through resolutions of the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly. Now, those are not legally binding resolutions, so in the future, we should have an international treaty that recognizes the right to a healthy environment, but that's going to take a little bit more time. And even though they are not legally binding, UN resolutions actually do make a difference. In 2010, the UN passed resolutions recognizing for the first time the right to water. And since then, those resolutions have been a catalyst for countries to amend their constitutions to include the right to water. So that's happened in Costa Rica, Fiji, Mexico, Slovenia, and others. It's been a catalyst for legal recognition of the right in legislation in countries like France. And most importantly, again, and I keep saying this, most importantly, it has resulted in action on the ground to deliver on that commitment. And Canada is a good example. Canada, which for a long time resisted global recognition of the right to water, we finally changed our position after the UN passed those resolutions. And in the last 6 years, Canada has invested billions of dollars in ending long-term boil water advisories in Indigenous communities. To date, since 2015, we have lifted 107 long-term boil water advisories, changing the lives of thousands of people living on Indigenous reserves in this country. And it's, of course, long overdue, but that's really great progress. During COVID-19, a number of countries that have recognized the right to a water passed laws preventing utility companies from cutting off people's water supply if they couldn't pay their bills. And so that, again, is a life-changing, life-saving intervention, which is caused by these UN resolutions. So ultimately, universal recognition of the right to a healthy environment acknowledges the simple reality that Kenneth alluded to, that our lives, our health, and our well-being depend on the health of this beautiful planet. We're not separate from or superior to nature. We are rather intimately, intricately woven into its fabric. And this is not just an Indigenous belief. This is scientific reality. We share DNA with every living thing on this planet. Nature is not just a warehouse of resources for humans to exploit, but a community to which we are remarkably fortunate to belong. So states must not only recognize, but implement the right to a healthy environment. This means taking a rights-based approach to tackling the climate crisis, using a rights-based approach to conserving biodiversity, using a rights-based approach to deal with air pollution and water pollution. It means switching from fossil fuels to renewables as quickly as possible. It means respecting the rights of Indigenous people to their lands, waters, and the species that sustain their cultures while we protect 30% of the Earth's land and waters by 2030. And we have to create a circular economy in which everything that humans make and use can be safely reused, recycled, and composted. You know, with COVID-19, humanity has paid a terrible price for ignoring scientists' warnings. We mustn't make that same mistake again by ignoring climate scientists and ecologists. It is not too late for the global environmental crisis, but the clock is ticking. If we place human rights and nature at the heart of the post-pandemic recovery, humans could achieve a just and sustainable future in which everyone lives a happy, healthy, and fulfilling life in harmony with nature on this beautiful blue-green planet. So that concludes my remarks. I'm hoping we can have a conversation, answer some questions, but let me just conclude by saying thank you to all of you for the tremendous work that you are all doing to protect the people we love and this home planet that we share. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We do have 6 minutes for questions, and there's one in the chat from Lois stating, do any provinces have environmental bill of rights or similar legislation that covers off the right to a healthy environment?
So yes, the answer is yes. There are 2 provinces plus the 3 northern territories that have legislation recognizing the right to a healthy environment. Quebec actually was at the forefront globally, recognizing the right to a healthy environment in 1978 in their Environmental Quality Act, and then in 2006, adding it to the Quebec Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms. And Ontario is the other province. And what's interesting is the Conference Board of Canada has published comparisons of environmental performance in Canada, province by province. And lo and behold, the 2 provinces that rise to the top of those performance standings are Quebec and Ontario. So that's just further evidence that the right to a healthy environment can make a difference. The Environmental Bill of Rights in Ontario was brought in 1993. It's in dire need of an upgrade to really bring it up to the standards of the 21st century. But it's a starting point. And so those are the provinces and territories where the right to a healthy environment currently enjoys legal recognition.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
I should apologize to the translators if I spoke a little bit quickly. It's just I get excited talking about this topic.
It is exciting stuff. You can either indicate that you have a question in the chat, or you can use the reactions button to raise your hand.
Yeah, I see a question in the chat from Gordon. Do you expect Canada will declare the combustion engine to be banned in the near future? We've already seen a number of countries and indeed provinces in Canada that have passed laws saying that internal combustion engine vehicles will not be sold past a certain date. You know, the technology of electric vehicles has advanced incredibly quickly. The price has come down really quickly. And, you know, the global leader on this is Norway, where the last time I checked, over 80% of new vehicles sold in Norway were fully electric vehicles. So the future is coming at us very quickly. I expect that within a decade, we won't need laws that ban the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles. They simply will no longer be competitive. In the next 5 years, I expect electric vehicles will dominate the vehicle market.
Thank you. Any other questions?
There's another one here about advice about how to get the bill into law. So I think, you know, the bill that you've created is tremendous. It's very inspiring. It should enjoy huge public support. And one of the things that could be really fundamental to getting it through the legislature is to get the business community on board. And that's something that I've been working on at the global level with a group called the B Team and also Business for Nature. And I expect that later this month, we'll be coming out with quite a powerful statement from progressive businesses supporting United Nations recognition of the right to a healthy environment. So it'd be terrific to have some New Brunswick businesses that are progressive, that are willing to come out and say, we need to do this. We need to do it for our children. We need to do it for the future. That's one powerful approach. And I think, the work that you're all doing is terrific. You need to build alliances with members of the provincial legislature. That's critically important. It's great to have the Green Party supporting this, and maybe one day in Canada the Green Party will be in government, but until that time we have to work with the other parties. And so critically important to get them to understand that this is an issue that should cross party lines, that should be enjoying support from political parties right across the spectrum.
Great, thank you. We have one question from Tim Murphy that says, did our neighbors in PI not recently pass a bill?
So in Prince Edward Island, I believe there is a bill, but I haven't heard that it's passed. So that's something we'll have to check on. I mean, if it has passed, that's tremendous. That adds tremendous momentum to your efforts. Another thing that bears watching is that I think the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child, we've been working with them, gently applying pressure. And I think that there should be an announcement in the short term that the Committee on the Rights of the Child is going to draft what's called a general comment on children's rights and the environment. So this is really kind of the world's leading experts on children's rights saying, to what extent do children have this right to a healthy environment? And that will be, I'm sure it will be a good report, and those kinds of general comments provide kind of fundamental guidance to governments around the world in terms of their human rights obligations. And that's another point that's worth making, is that this isn't actually an option for governments to choose. Governments don't get to choose, oh, we're going to recognize and respect some human rights and not others. Governments have obligations to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights. And in a world where over 80% of the countries already recognize the right to a healthy environment in law, and then of the countries that don't recognize it in law, at least half of those support it, because those are small island developing states who simply haven't changed their laws but are fully supportive of it. We're at a place where the right to a healthy environment is basically already, at least from a legal vantage point, customary international law. So it's not an option, it's actually an obligation for governments to respect, protect, and fulfill.
Wonderful, thank you. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions. But there's some really great comments in the chat there and another question as well. So first, we need to thank you so much, Dr. Voigt, for being here today and for sharing your thoughts and your hope with us. We appreciate it.
Well, let me say good luck to you. And if there's anything I can do to help at any stage of your campaign, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to hand the mic over to Sam Arnold.
Thank you so much again, Dr. Boyd. It was a pleasure listening to your presentation. As we've been getting ready to launch the proposed New Brunswick Environmental Bill of Rights, we've been collecting video endorsements from individuals. We would like to now share a few of these with you right now. Anika?
Hi, I'm Jenica Atwood, Member of Parliament for Fredericton, and I firmly believe that children have a right to a healthy environment, and I very much support an Environmental Bill of Rights to enshrine this in Canadian law.
There's nothing. Yep. Okay, 1, 2.
I became a politician shortly after having my children because I realized just how important it is to work hard for the next generation. And I'm so proud to be passing on a love of nature to my kids. Right, Bunny?
Yeah.
Hello, we're ladies from the San Francisco Bay Area, and we're firm believers in your Environmental Bill of Justice. Yes.
Hi,
my name is Amelia Penny Crocker. I'm a climate activist and writer from Nova Scotia. Last year, I wrote a letter a week to the Prime Minister of Canada about climate change. Why? Well, because as a youth, I know that it is my future that I stand to lose. Also, youth voices deserve to be heard on this issue, and youth futures have to be protected. The environment is more than just nature, it's our home. In my 41st letter to the Prime Minister, I wrote about the fact that clean air is a right. To me, that statement is non-negotiable. As are the statements, clean water is a right, and a healthy environment is a right. But for so many around the world, they don't have the right to clean water, clean air, or a healthy environment. This has to change, and together we can make that change.
We have also received statements of support from several individuals, from Rafi Kavukian, who's a singer, author, founder of Child Honoring, and our Children's Environmental Health Champion. Rafi has been a longtime supporter of this bill. He could not be with us today, but he sent the following statement, and I'm quoting: "The New Brunswick Bill of Environmental Rights, an act to protect children, all New Brunswickers, and nature sets an important precedent to be imitated everywhere. When our children's environmental health is honored and protected by law, we can reap the rewards of a safe and healthy world," end quote. And I would like to now invite Edith Doucette, a retired member of the civil service and a passionate proponent of early childhood development, to present her statement.
Hi, bonjour. Je suis Edith Doucette. As a retired member of the New Brunswick Civil Service, a former kindergarten teacher, and a longtime proponent of best practices in early childhood development, I am happy to give my wholehearted endorsement to the proposed New Brunswick Bill of Environmental Rights, an act to protect children, all New Brunswickers, and nature. Early childhood professionals have known instinctively about the benefits of getting children out in nature and the relationship between time in nature and happier children. We need to preserve these wild spaces and all their biodiversity. We need to make science-based decisions that keep all New Brunswickers safe and healthy. All children have a right to healthy environments and should be able to live their lives free from the effects of harmful chemicals and pollutants and be protected from environmental and health risk. For the benefit of the present and future generations, we need to ensure that our children and grandchildren will have clean air, clean water, safe and healthy food, safe consumer products, and a stable climate in which to live, play, grow, and become resilient to future challenges. I strongly urge government to pass the New Brunswick Bill of Environmental Rights, an act to protect children, all New Brunswickers, and nature. And I'd like to take this moment to congratulate you on your excellent work. C'est une très belle initiative et je désire vous féliciter. Merci.
It was a beautiful initiative, and I'd like to congratulate you.
Thank you, Edith. And I would now like to invite Dr. Philip Landrigan, the Director of the Program for Global Public Health and the Common Good, and the Director of the Global Observatory on Pollution and Health Schiller Institute for Integrated Science and Society, to present his statement. Dr. Landrigan.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. So I'm Dr. Philip Landrigan. I'm a pediatrician. I'm an epidemiologist. I direct the Program for Global Public Health and the Common Good at Boston College in Boston, Massachusetts. I am the grandson of a Nova Scotian. My grandfather, David Archibald Landrigan, was born in Pictou, Nova Scotia, and made his way south, and we still have many family in the Maritimes. I've worked for more than 4 decades to understand how toxic chemicals in the environment affect children's health, and to translate those scientific findings into advocacy to protect children. Children are extremely vulnerable to environmental hazards, much more so than adults. Pound for pound of body weight, they're more heavily exposed. Their developing organ systems are much more vulnerable, especially during pregnancy and in the first years after birth. Even very small doses of exposure to lead, pesticides, air pollution, and other toxic hazards in the environment, low levels of exposure that would bounce off an adult can cause permanent, lasting, lifelong damage to children, impairing their brains, their nervous systems, their reproductive organs, their immune functions. And children, of course, are defenseless against these hazards. They don't know how to run away. The little ones don't know how to speak up. And therefore, the responsibility is on us, the adults, and on society as a whole to grant children or to recognize the right of children to a healthy environment, to recognize their human right to grow and play and learn and develop in a safe and healthy place. So it's for all these reasons that passage of the child-focused Bill of Environmental Rights in New Brunswick is the right, the moral, and the ethical thing to do. Passage of this bill will be good for New Brunswick, and it'll be good for Canada, because it'll give the nation a generation of strong, healthy, intelligent, creative, economically productive adults who will lead the province and Canada into the 21st century. I strongly encourage you to pass the New Brunswick Bill of Environmental Rights and act to protect children, all New Brunswickers, and nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Landrigan. And thank you to everyone who took the time to send us these videos and statements. We truly appreciate your support. And I would like to now invite Quinn McCaskill to our virtual stage. Quinn McCaskill is a 15-year-old high school student living in Sackville, New Brunswick. She is passionate about climate action and justice and has been involved in everything from climate strikes to working with the municipalities to presentations like this one. Quinn is on the NBEN steering committee and is involved in the Youth Environmental Network. Last November, she combined her passion for the environment and her determination to achieve bold systemic change with her love of words, and she wrote this slam poem titled Fire.
Thank you. Yeah, so today I'm joining from Signic Mi'kma'ki, and I'm really excited to be here and share my poem with you. Fire, the thing that sets us apart from other species, other creatures, the thing that gave us a head start. Fire, the thing that unleveled the field and made us think that what we conquered was ours to wield. Reality check. Who's in control of nature now? Fast evolving humans. No, it's all just illusions. We can't control nature. She's got a mind of her own. And we can't use fire as our claim to the throne, because who's really the master in between us? Well, fire's stronger, don't you see? Because it's the symbol of the crisis that's tearing our world up. When our house is on fire, we have to wake up to the ashes that cover all the lies, to the smoke that chokes our planet and our skies, to the cries and the fear in the eyes of the youth. Wake up, because the tides aren't turning and we're living in a world that is burning. Trees, entire ecosystems burned to the ground, but there's still time to turn things around. The fire's within us now, deep inside, anger and passion that we cannot hide. Spark leads to flame, leads to blazing roar, and that is something politicians can't ignore. Energy sparks action, momentum is growing. Now it is clear which way the winds are blowing. The youth are alive with fire in our souls, a light on our faces and the signs that we hold. We youth are awake to the world that we live in. We see the flames, but we're not ready to give in, so we stand hand in hand and speak our demands. Though surrounded by flames, we draw our strength from the land. We fight fire with fire, and we're not going to stop. Though every candle may just feel like a drop of water in a bucket, that's what made up the ocean, and together we're power. So don't get the wrong notion. Sparks jump between lands. Fire knows no borders. Millions stand proudly upon the shoulders of our ancestors, and we look ahead to future generations. We think long and hard about what kind of nations we're passing down, and we need to hear your voice. So come and join us in the most important choice we've made since the beginning of time. Do we listen to the signs and turn on a dime, or does the power of greed outweigh the power of need? The fire of destruction consuming our deeds. This is the moment where we choose, and with all we have to lose, I beg you to kindle your fire within, so that together as one we may begin the recreation of this earth amid the ashes, rebirth, and together we'll light the fires of tomorrow, and soon they'll blaze higher than the fires of sorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Quinn, for your inspiring poem. I hope the translator was able to keep up with you. Now, having heard from Quinn and those great endorsements, I am going to hand over the mic to Gordon, who will let you know how you can support the proposed Environmental Bill of Rights and wrap up the launch for us. Gordon? I think you're muted.
There we go. Thank you, Sam. We need your support to help make this bill a reality. A link will be dropped in the chat to the website of the New Brunswick Environmental Bill of Rights, an act to protect children, all New Brunswickers, and nature, where you can read the proposed bill itself and learn more about it. We would also urge you to sign up as a supporter, either as an organization, if you are part of one, or as an individual, and write to your MLA to tell them you want to see this kind of act in New Brunswick, which can easily do on the website, and join growing movement for environmental rights in New Brunswick. We will also email you this link after the launch. We would also like to encourage you to please share widely and encourage others to sign up as supporters and engage their MLAs to help ensure that all New Brunswickers can safely grow, work, play, and live in New Brunswick in a healthy environment. Stronger environmental protections are needed to help protect the health and well-being of our most vulnerable. Before we wrap up, we would like to once again thank everyone who has supported the proposed bill and helped us to where we are today. East Coast Environmental Law, the Office of the Child and Youth Advocate, the Canadian Environmental Law Association, and EcoJustice, as well as Kenneth Francis, Dr. Boyd, Quinn McCaskill, for being part of today's launch, and of course, all of you for attending today. If you would like to learn more about the New Brunswick Environmental Rights Caucus, please contact the New Brunswick Environmental Network at nben@nben.ca. Our media contacts will be on the proposed bill's website. And thank you again for attending this launch and advocating for the proposed New Brunswick Environmental Bill of Rights. As we wrap up this event, we would like to leave you with this song from Rafi Kavukian, the great supporter of our initiative through the years. And thank you and have a good day.
We heard it from the round.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Merci tout le monde.
Thanks, everybody. Woohoo!
Good luck, folks. Go for it.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you so much, David. Yes, we're going.